Hi, I'm Mark Mueller. This is the Truth and Justice League podcast, and our first guest is Kristina Baehr. Welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about you? You're a lawyer, and you're one of my personal heroes. So tell me about you.
Well, the bad news is that I was poisoned in a house that I was living in, and that led to what I'm doing now. But I grew up in New York City, and then I went to Princeton for undergrad and in college thought a lot about community organizing. Lived in Africa, spent a lot of time there, community organizing, bringing people together, working on economic empowerment for people living with HIV and AIDS when I was in Africa. So I had this heart for helping people. And as life happens, sometimes you get a little bit wayward. And so I was helping people. And then I clerked for a federal judge in Boston. And then I went into patent litigation because I wanted to do trials. And so I worked at a big firm here in Austin called McCool Smith. Very high profile, big patent cases. Ericsson, Samsung, TiVo, Comcast. And I started not feeling good. And I couldn't see straight. And I got dizzy. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I thought maybe I should drive into oncoming traffic. Thoughts I'd never had before. At that point, I had 4 children. And people told me, you should reduce stress in your life. You know, doctors said, you're just a busy mom. Maybe you should think about a career change. These symptoms seem to be stress related. And I did that. I went to the government, switched jobs. I had every other Friday off, more time with my kids. I was gluten-free and sugar-free and dairy-free, exercising all the time. And I got sicker. And then they sent us to quarantine at home during COVID, the COVID shutdowns. And I got sicker. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And finally, a doctor gave me a battery of tests for Lyme disease, mono, malaria. Do I have West Nile disease, something from Africa? And one of the things that she tested me for was mycotoxins. And my scores were through the roof. And she said, go test your house. And we found out that our house had been slowly killing my whole family for 8 years.
Wow. What was that like trying to figure out what happened? What was going on with you guys? I've heard of these stories before from different people, right? And a lot of times people get down the crazy daisy chain in the medical profession of every diagnosis in the world, but then it comes back to, well, we don't know. Maybe you're just crazy because of stress.
Well, I think it's the working mom disease, right? There's a working mom, so we'll just talk to her about stress. Maybe give her some Wellbutrin, maybe Prozac. You know, let's give her Adderall. What can we give her to help her fix the symptoms? And doctors aren't equipped to say, tell me about your environment. So I kind of made that my mission. I think I was going to well-meaning doctors, by the way. I went to wonderful integrative health doctors. This just wasn't a tool in their toolkit. And that's what was so scary. It was like a sci-fi movie. I mean, there was black mold called Stachybotrys in our walls, in our HVAC, next to my daughter's bed. The mold assessor said he often finds it behind the bed of the kid most affected. And that's where we found it. And it was killing us. And I think I would have died. By the time I left, I had a tumor. I had POTS. I collapsed and was taken to the emergency room. My heart was beating so fast I couldn't get it to calm down. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was anemic. I had internal bleeding. I was so sick. And I think that the house would have killed us. So I'm thankful to the doctor who figured it out. Her name's Dr. Gabrielle Picardo, and she's amazing. And she set me on the path towards health. And as I was on that journey, I started building the case for my own family against the people who poisoned my family. And the defendants were brutal. I mean, the defendants said, well, there's really not enough mold here to make anybody sick. There are no acceptable limits. Mold doesn't cause the kind of harm that you say, which I had brain damage, and 2 of my kids had brain damage. One was running into the corners of walls. He was 2 years old. He was regressing in his developmental milestones. And the defendants were like, mold just doesn't do that to you. And therefore, you are crazy. And that was the defense in my case. There's not enough X, therefore, you're making it up. And they actually had the audacity at trial to basically, again, blame it on the working mom disease. It was during COVID. She was a stressed out mom during COVID. And, my team said, yes, she was a stressed out mom during COVID. I'll take your stressed out mom during COVID situation and raise you a house full of toxic mold, losing your house, everything in it, getting displaced, being sick and taking care of sick kids all at the same time, trying to figure out where you're going to live while you're working at the same time. That was my COVID spring of 2020 and fall of 2020. And I think in my own case, the jury saw that this is real, that it really does affect you, that it does matter. And we can't let the bad actors continue to poison our families. So as I was building our own case, I realized there are very few lawyers out there doing this kind of work. And also, by the way, I wasn't feeling good. So I thought, I'll just open a shop. I'll handle just a couple cases for a couple families. I didn't know where I was going to find those cases, by the way. But I'll just start a little firm, couple cases, and I'll help some people. Because we really need to be doing this kind of work. Well, CNBC did a story on my family, and it linked to my brand new website that my 13-year-old had just published the week before. And I got 1,000 calls because there is such a need for this kind of work in our country. And I've been running ever since to try to catch up and try to help as many people as we can.
Tell me how you got better.
It's not a finished answer yet. I think it's a marathon and not a sprint. I think I thought that if we just move out, we'll all get better.
Right.
And that's not how it works, because once you've been exposed to a toxin, whatever toxin that is, you become sensitized to it. And that means that whenever you're exposed again, the inflammatory response happens faster, cytokine response faster. So we've had a really hard time finding a safe place to live. So we just bought a house on Blanco Street. It's an old house. I can't wait. We have wonderful people helping us make it as safe as possible for my family. So I hope that will be one answer. Getting out of the environment and getting to safety is the single most important thing you can do to get better. And I think my brain is not really caught up. I lost a lot of brain matter. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I had a 176 on my LSAT out of 180. I was really, really, really smart. But what I lost in brain power, I gained in empathy. Mm-hmm. And I have a superpower now. And you know what? That's okay. My clients they don't have 176s on their LSATs. I am able to relate to them because I am them, because this affected my brain too, because I know what it's like to have short-term memory loss and to not be able to keep track of what's going on and to forget details and to drive to school and forget where you're going. That's familiar to me. And as a result, I can connect to my clients in a different way. So I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I think it's slowly being redeemed.
I'm wondering, do you ever get the feeling that there was some kind of a reason or purpose behind this terrible thing that happened to you?
So I believe in Gus, God, universe, spirit. I think that there's a divine order to the world. And my theology does not allow me to think that my God wanted my kid to be sick.
Right.
He did not want, or she, Gus, did not want Scott running into the corners of walls.
Yes.
That was not, there's no purpose in that. There's no greater purpose in that. And I think that the bad things that happen in our lives can be redeemed. And I think that it is being redeemed. I think every time I'm able to help someone, my own story has more meaning and purpose to it. So I think that Gus can bring transcendence from the bad things, but didn't cause them or didn't want them.
Yeah. Kind of a complicated situation to look at. I was just looking at it from a standpoint of, I know that this area that you're in is an area that was vastly underappreciated. And, you know, as a lawyer, I've seen these kinds of things where people poo-poo the mold cases or many other types of cases that they have difficulty going, okay, here's the causation link. And so the bad guys get all tied up into that whole knot. But it seems like, you know, there was quite obvious. We're in a toxic world. And houses are one example of that. Workspaces are another. Communities are another. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. And we're just now starting to, in my view, see the light of day where people are even understanding and appreciating this actually happens. And in your situation, whatever it was, put you very close to death. And it's an incredibly profound experience that had it not been for that, you wouldn't probably be in this area of law at all.
Oh, I absolutely wouldn't be. I mean, the way Evan just put it is, you know, there are shoulds and there are musts. And sometimes you get into a place in your life where you just must do something. And it wasn't even a question. When I got this call from Hawaii, I had to go. I knew that there were people there who had been poisoned by the United States. The United States had contaminated their water with jet fuel, and I knew I had to go. It wasn't I should go or I could go or I want to go. It was like I had to go. And I think I got a call from East Palestine, Ohio in December, and there was a community there that needed me, and they called and said, "We're sick, will you come help?" And I didn't have a client there yet. I was on my way there at a Southwest flight, freaking Southwest, got delayed. And I had to get there. How am I going to get there? I had to get there. I had to get there right then. I could not be late. There are these people who need me. I must get there. I've never done this before. Called a few people. How do I get a plane? I got to get a plane. Any plane. Well, that's going to be a lot of money. I don't care. Any cost, I'm getting a plane. Tell me where to be. I mean, I chartered a plane to get to these people because, by the way, it cost me $30,000. That's the price tag.
Wow.
It didn't matter. I had to put it on 3 different credit cards. I don't care. I had to get there because there was a community that needed me. And that's the feeling that I have now. This must. I must get there. And I think that's how it is for me now. This is a mission. It's what I am called to do. It's how Gus or the universe is where it has me right now. And when I get out there and I meet communities of sick families, they need me. I can resonate with their stories. I can speak back their truths, right? They tell me there was no testing. I was like, I bet they didn't even test for the right things. They were like, how do you know that? Because that's what they do. That's what they do. Because they come in and they test, but they don't test for the right things. So they can say, it's all within acceptable limits. Well, are you testing for the components of vinyl chloride? Well, no, that's not one of the components we're testing for. Well, then of course it's acceptable limits. Similarly in Hawaii, same thing. Navy does all this testing. They test for something called total organic compounds, TOC. Did they test for petroleum? No. But they told people they had non-detects because their TOC was fine. It makes no sense, right? But it makes all the sense in the world because when you've seen it before, you know what's happening. And so I can resonate with them, and I know their stories even though they haven't told them to me yet. And I don't come from this place that's holier than thou, which I think is how a lot of people treat victims of exposure. They treat them that they're hysterical, that they're crazy, that they're psychosomatic, that there's not enough X in the water to make people sick. There's not enough X in the air to make people sick, X being whatever the toxin is. So follow my logic. There's not enough X to make people sick. Let's take the Hawaii case. There's not enough fuel in the water to make anybody sick. Well, we did have more than 3,000 incidents of people reporting acute poisoning symptoms to local emergency facilities. Okay.
Just a coincidence.
Well, but here's how we explain that. There's not enough X to make anybody sick. And so therefore, those 3,000 people were psychosomatic. They had a stress response. So we're going to look at sick people and call them crazy. That's insane. But that's the position. That was the position in my case. The defense experts diagnosed me as somatic disorder. The United States took the position in Hawaii that every one of my 7,000 clients was psychosomatic because they couldn't have gotten sick. There was not enough X in the water to make people sick.
You know, if it wasn't real life, it would be funny.
I mean, and you know what? At the time, I was really offended because this is me. When they stand up and they say that, I feel like they're saying I'm crazy because I am my clients. And I think I took it really personally. And I accused those lawyers of ethical misconduct because you're denying a historical event. You represent the United States of America. You're not allowed to be a zealous advocate. You're not allowed to. Your job, I know this because I used to represent the United States. Your job is to do the right thing. And when you hire an expert to say that there wasn't enough fuel to make people sick, when you know that 3,000 people had acute poisoning symptoms, that's wrong. That's ethically, morally wrong. Well, they don't like when you say that. And they're just doing their job, maybe. And you know what? What a gift.
What a gift.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Why did I not see that as such a gift? Like they get to court and they stand up in front of this judge who was there at the time and they say to her, this case is about the science.
Yeah.
This case is about the science, Judge. And the government followed the science. There just simply was not enough petroleum. It didn't enter the system across the entire system. It only was in certain locations. And even then, it was not in concentrations to make people sick. I mean, you can't show up from Washington, D.C. and tell a judge who was on the island at that time that people were not sick. And then, of course, I showed the dog, that had seizures, like cute little puppy. And I'm like, was he psychosomatic? How about this baby with welts all over her? Is that a psychosomatic response of the baby? The Navy officers were texting pictures of the kids with the welts on the day that they found the fuel release. And that day, as they had those pictures, they told the public that there was no indication the water was not safe. Well, are those pictures an indication the water's not safe? How about the smell of fuel? But see, they could say there's no indication it's not safe because they had no test results.
Right. Inconclusive by design.
And that's what the EPA did in East Palestine. They tested for the wrong thing.
Right.
They had a plane that was ready to go up into the air to test all of the various components that they needed to test. They grounded the plane. They delayed the flight. And then when they finally sent it up, they narrowed the list of components to only a few.
Wow.
And then they can say, well, we just don't have any test results that show that. Well, yeah, because you didn't test for the right thing at the time. And then the EPA and the CDC tell these communities, tell the doctors in these communities, there are no tests that you can run. No, there's just no testing. You can't test if there's fuel in the body. You can't test if there's vinyl chloride in the body. Really? Well, the Cleveland Clinic can. You're the EPA. You're the CDC. You know that your own federal guidelines have tests for these very components. You just don't want to know. Now, I'm not accusing them of intentional misconduct because that would be excluded under the Federal Tort Claims Act. I'm just saying it was negligent.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have the standards and you don't follow them, that's the definition of negligence. And that's what the law is designed to protect.
Well, we're glad you're here to protect people. This is great. Tell me a little bit. Let's just double back a couple things. The Navy case that you just described. What's the status of that now?
Well, we tried the case in May. And we tried it to a federal judge. But before then, the government had admitted liability. So if I can back up, I was called in December of 2021. The fuel release was in November of 2021. I got there in January. And I started meeting people and I started speaking out. And I started saying what I believed, which is that these people are sick. And I started passing the mic to my sick clients. And even then, the Navy was saying, oh, no harm, no foul. It's just in and out of your body in 48 hours. And so, yeah, people might have some acute symptoms, which, by the way, DOJ later reneged on. But at the time, they recognized people might be having acute symptoms. But don't worry, won't be anything long term. And they told all the doctors in the area, don't test. And so no doctors did any testing at all. They didn't test for CBC count. They didn't test for thyroid. They didn't do any blood tests, much less the petroleum tests that you can actually do in the body. So they didn't do any testing. And in fact, one of them told my clients, we're not going to test because we don't want to open Pandora's box.
What?
That was the attitude at the time. So I'm just a girl in my cowboy boots, right? This is my very first call from another state. I mean, I have my cowboy boots and my personal credit card. I didn't have a single client. I had a few clients at my new firm. And I remember, going out with a client that I knew was going to be just a leader in this movement. And she said, tell me about your firm. And I told her, well, it's called Just Well, and it's relatively new. It's a startup. She got this big grin on her face. She just wanted to know, was I going to tell her the truth? She'd done all the research. She knew all about me, right? But she said, you are the only one who showed up with research and truth. There were all sorts of other lawyers on the scene, but I was the one speaking truth, and I wasn't afraid to do it, and I wasn't afraid to do it to anyone who asked. And so we built more and more. I got to know more and more clients. Clients people fired their lawyers, hired me, and then I ended up as lead counsel on this environmental case against the United States, which we believe is the first successful case against the United States for environmental injury ever. Flint is still pending. Camp Lejeune is still pending. This is the first one. And the government admitted liability, which made our clients the prevailing party. And then we went to trial on damages.
What's the status of the damage report?
We're just waiting. But what I would say was so amazing about getting to try the case, because, most of these cases settle. Most cases settle. And most lawyers would have settled the case for whatever the government was willing to pay. And I'm not most lawyers, because this is me. I am them, right? I can't tell them to settle for nothing. So And not to, say that anything about the government's offers or our answers or anything like that, but it had not settled, and so we went to trial. And I have to tell you that that's where all that community organizing from Africa came into play. I had just earned the trust of the Hawaiian people over those 2 years. And so when I came, the Sierra Club was there, the Oahu Water Protectors. When we showed up on that first day of court, there was a line around the building. There were all these signs. They were for these military families in a place, by the way, where the military was not welcome. So the fact that the Hawaiian community embraced my clients' military families, and that my military family clients embraced the people of Hawaii and tried to shut down that facility, which they did, was just, that is the story. That is the story. We can talk about damages, but
Yeah.
they shut down Red Hill. They shut down this facility together. And I got to come up to that courthouse. There was a camera just like this. And my husband was there, and he had kind of arranged where people were standing. And the cameras were here and the people were there. And I started to speak to the cameras, and I said, no, I'm going to speak to the people first. And I turned around and I spoke to the people directly. And I said, this is a case about a government that abandoned its people. But it's also a case about the people of Hawaii who embraced them. And together you stood up and you marched and you brought this case and you spoke out and you prevailed. You prevailed in shutting down Red Hill, and you prevailed in the case. We are coming in as the prevailing parties, and now we go forth to prove the extent of the harm. Greatest moment of my career so far.
Powerful story.
Probably my life so far. I mean, it's just, to be part of that is such an honor, right? I mean, to be embraced like that by the people of Hawaii, who, by the way, did not like me when I arrived. Well, I don't know if you know about the history in Hawaii, but I was definitely a haole when I got there.
Well, I know, because my paralegal lives in Hawaii now.
Oh, okay.
And so she's lived she calls it on island, on and off, for many years. And it took her a long time to become embraced by any of the community, because they're very tribal and protective of their culture. And there's a lot of history there. And if you're not one of them, it can be a really tough go, because they've been betrayed. They've been seized and abused and all the kind of stuff that's going on. People don't respect the land. They don't respect the culture.
That's right. And I think whenever I show up, this happened in East Palestine. Whenever I show up someplace, typically they hate lawyers. And I have to just start out by saying, I hate lawyers too. I mean, will you give me a chance to earn your trust? Because you rightfully hate lawyers, and I hate lawyers too. And man, the people in East Palestine hate lawyers. The comments online, accident chaser, ambulance chaser, go home, all this stuff, they were brutal. And in both places, I just kept showing up. I'm here. I'm going to keep speaking truth about what happened. I'm going to keep supporting you. I'm going to keep bringing people together. And in both communities, by the way, the bad guys want to divide. They want to divide. They want the good guys to be divided, to break into factions. And so in both places, they get online on Facebook and they create fake profiles to stir the pot. And that's what they were doing in East Palestine. But see, I've seen it before, so I can handle it better the second time. I don't have to be offended when they say that. I can just respond calmly online and know everybody else is going to see my response to this wacko person who's accusing me of all sorts of things. And it's really been a beautiful thing in both places that I had less time in East Palestine to earn people's trust. And I hope that I'll continue to earn trust over the course of the case. But I only had 6 weeks to build a movement there. And the movement had already started. It's not like I'm building it. That they had already mobilized. But I came in and helped unite people because the bad guys had divided them. And we need to stand up and be united. We need to help communities rise up. And so I am not a class action lawyer. I am not a mass tort lawyer. I'm not even a personal injury lawyer. I am a community safety lawyer. And I am hired to come into communities and to help families and communities rise up. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And it's such an honor. And I hope that I will get to go to more communities, you know, whether I have to charter a plane or not. I want to show up and help and empower the people to take charge of the justice system and to use the justice system for what it's designed for. Because the justice system is entrusted with enforcing our safety rules. But it can't do its job if people don't bring the claims. And it can't do its job if you and me aren't willing to take the claims and aren't willing to take the heat and be called the ambulance chaser or whatever they want to call us, right? We have to be brave enough, and our clients have to be brave enough to hold the bad guys to account, because if not us, who will? If not now, when? If we don't say something about it, the EPA is going to come into the next disaster zone and is going to tell those doctors not to treat people. And at least after this case, I hope they think twice before they do that. That's what the law is for. It wants to prevent the bad conduct from happening again.
Well, I can see why people would want to hire you.
Well, I get fired up.
Let me ask you just a quick question about how in the world did you find out that the doctors have been told not to test? And that the thing you said about the Pandora's box, that's just mind-blowing. Not that they do it, but that they got caught doing it.
Well, because there was a letter.
Yeah.
I mean, there in Hawaii, there was a letter.
Yes, I was.
That testing is not advised, and treat the symptoms, and the symptoms will dissipate in 48 hours. Okay? Well, think about that. We're going to give that letter to everybody on the island. Well, how do you know that the symptoms are going to dissipate in 48 hours? How do you know that? On what grounds? On what research are you basing that conclusion on? Mm-hmm. And they say, well, there isn't any research. Well, if there's not any research, how can you say it's only 48 hours? You can't have it both ways. Actually, there's lots of research. Can we look at Camp Lejeune, please? Same contaminants. People got sick for decades, got cancer, died. Why are we saying it's going to be 48 hours? But imagine going to that doctor, right, on the island, and you say, I have migraines. And the doctor says, well, let's treat the migraines. And you say, it really started around the time. And you say, it really started around the time that I drank. Do you think, doctor, it could be related? And the doctor looks at you very sincerely and says, well, the good news is this certainly can't have anything to do with the fuel, because we know that the symptoms related to the fuel dissipated in 48 hours. And so you are fine. We'll treat the migraines. Right?
That's insane. That's insane.
But that's
insane.
That's what happened. And and those are well-meaning doctors,
right,
because they trust the institutions that they trust. And if public health tells you that it's going to dissipate in 48 hours, you believe them. Of course you do. You assume that they have some research backing up that statement. But, the Navy was still giving out that guidance. So remember, the fuel spill was in November. Thousands of people got sick November, December. Well, the Navy was still giving out that guidance in February, and actually updating guidance in February that still had that 48-hour statement in there. Well, why are we giving out this guidance in February? Why do they need the guidance in February if it was only a 48-hour response? The absurdity knows no bounds.
Right.
And this is just common sense. So I cannot wait in East Palestine to get to do this with a jury, because juries, look, judges and lawyers are skeptical. Okay, even plaintiffs' lawyers can be skeptical. You know who's not skeptical? The American people. I do these focus groups day in and day out, and I ask them, do you think mold causes brain damage? They all raise their hand. They don't need an expert to tell them that. They just know that. They inherently know that. Here's what I want you to know. There are thousands, millions of people around the country being poisoned. And there is a massive cover-up about that. And that is what is going on. You've got what happened in Hawaii. The Navy said, no indication it's not safe. Just shh. East Palestine, EPA comes in 3 days later, it's fine, everyone can go home. Shh. Construction companies all over the country building houses that become toxic in 2 years. Shh. They don't want you to know. And that is what we are moving up and rising up against. We have thousands of people, thousands of families in this country that are standing up and saying, you cannot poison our families anymore. You cannot do it. We're going to rise up, not for ourselves, but for the families around us and for those who come behind us. And it's really beautiful to watch. I mean, you said that we're starting to see the light of day. I think these families are waking up. And these moms, often moms, are taking a stand. I've got 150 people who have been poisoned by Balfour Beatty. Over the course of a decade, there have been ceilings falling down in that community on the Naval Air Station in Key West. Ceilings are falling down with lead, asbestos, and mold. And you know what they say? Literally, you must be Italian to my client, because that's how this water damage is happening up here. You're boiling too much pasta. The gaslighting is real.
This is serious.
They seriously said that.
This just sounds like a Saturday Night Live.
That is what they said. And, but Balfour Beatty, like, shh, shh. The Navy, shh. They don't want anybody to know. And so you know what they do in that community instead of removing the wet materials? Everyone knows that when you have wet materials, the first thing you need to do is remove them, because otherwise it's going to grow, fester. You know what they did instead? Every ceiling in this community is wet. So they came in and they put little wooden strips across the ceiling to hold the wet materials in place. What is the jury going to do with that? Juries know you remove the wet materials. You don't leave it in place to fester right where the HVAC is so that the HVAC is going to circulate that toxic air through the whole house. What is happening in America is outrageous. And I am so proud of the people who are standing up and saying it's not okay and bringing these things to light.
It's a movement.
It's a movement.
You just recently had a case in Williamson County. Tell us about that.
We had a deal with opposing counsel on the Friday before. Long story short, defendant reneges on the deal. Confusion amongst defense counsel, whatever. So we had to get to trial on Monday. But we know exactly how to try these cases. And we got to go to voir dire with this very conservative county and talk to the jury about home. What does home mean to you? Well, home means safety, security. Well, does a landlord need to provide a safe home? Yes. Does that mean a home with safe air? Yes. How does a landlord provide a home with safe air? Well, they regularly inspect it. They check the HVACs. They look for water damage. If they have reports of mold, they remove the mold. They make it safe again. They clean it up. They hire professional remediators. So we went through all of that. And then we showed that there was a particular landlord who owned lots of complexes around the country, or around the state, I should say. And he cut costs and cut corners. There are 23 million rental units around the United States, and they're being bought up by these huge companies, investment firms, big management, and all of them are cutting costs and cutting corners and creating unsafe conditions. And this was one example of that. And the defendant and the defense counsel were so indignant, right? Mold is no big deal. We just pay people $1,000 and we let them out. They sign a release. If people want to come and get out because they have mold, no problem. We give them $1,000 and we let them sign a release. Again, hush payments, right? Non-disclosures, releases. We showed that this landlord was getting fake reviews made in India. And so on his, on the complex, it's like 1 star, 1 star, 1 star, 5 star, 5 star, 5 star. And you look at where the 5 stars are coming from, all from overseas. And the jury got mad. And we talked to the jury about anger. Is it okay to be angry? What do you do with anger? Is anger ever a good thing? Well, yes, it can be a catalyst for change. They talked about Jesus turning over the tables. Very conservative district, right?
Yes.
They're talking about, when I talked to them about anger, they said, well, Jesus got angry. Anger is, it's okay to get, Jesus was perfect, but it's okay to get angry. The question is, what do we do with that anger? Can we channel that anger? Can we channel it to make change? And, there's this, we live in Texas, right? And so people think that litigation is greedy. And I got to challenge that with this jury. I got to say, is it greedy to bring a claim? If the justice system is entrusted with enforcing our safety rules, is it greedy to bring a claim? Or is it brave? I had a wonderful client, and she had been at the complex. She'd complained a lot, right? And she had communicated to other people at the complex about the mold problem that was there. And she was worried about the people who couldn't leave, and she was worried about the babies and the elderly people, and she was worried. And I asked the jury during closing, I said, is she a Karen or is she Erin Brockovich? Is she greedy or is she brave? And I think with their verdict, they said she's brave.
What happened with the verdict?
They issued a verdict of $1 million. And it was interesting because I gave them 5 reasons for $500,000, and then I gave them 1 reason for $1 million. And I said, this man had 110 million under management. And I said, 1 million, he's cheap. So it's going to take $1 million to make it matter to him, to have any deterrent effect, to make sure this doesn't happen again. Send a message to this community. And by the way, we did all the research. We came in with our research ready to present to the judge in case we were challenged on sending a message. Because people say, well, that's not proper, yada, yada.
Right.
That is not true. That's not what the case law says. Because the case law says there are 2 purposes of tort law: to compensate victims and to deter future conduct, future bad conduct. It has a prevention mechanism, but those 2 have to go hand in hand. It has to be enough compensation to deter the future bad conduct. And the same is true with claims against the government, by the way, the claims in Hawaii and the claims against the EPA for East Palestine. It's going to have to be enough to deter the bad conduct. And that's what the jury did.
Congratulations.
It was an honor.
That's a tough county.
Most conservative county.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the defense counsel was so nonchalant about it. This is a mold case. Lady, didn't you get the memo? These cases died a long time ago. What are you doing? And I have to say that when I started this practice, when I had my own case, I was looking around and I was trying to find a contingency lawyer to call me back, personal injury lawyer. Because there are mold cases that have been tried in Texas over the years. And so I tried to find those lawyers. There was one lawyer in San Antonio, And on his website, it said, I only do wrongful death mold cases now. But I found his email, direct email. I emailed him. I emailed his paralegal. I left messages. Didn't even return my call. Wasn't even willing to spend 15 minutes with me just to give me some advice about to another lawyer about how to try these cases. Didn't even return my call. And I thought, you know what? That guy can have the dead people, and I'll represent the people who are still alive, because people need help. And my firm returns every call for that reason. You shouldn't ghost someone who's sick. And this is why I hate lawyers, most lawyers, no offense. But the holier than thou, indignant attitude of these lawyers is so upsetting. And it's on the plaintiff side too, because those mold people, they're crazy. And it's not just mold, it's any toxic exposure. I think that the lawyers in East Palestine thought people were crazy, but they're not. This is real, and this really affected people.
If you were going to give young lawyers or law students advice, what would you tell them generally?
Hone your craft. I think this is an art, and you get better over time, and you don't start out good at it. You have to learn. So find the best lawyers and surround yourself with those lawyers and learn from them. I learned at McCool Smith with tremendous lawyers, and I got to watch some of the best trial lawyers in action. And now I go down to Florida and I study under Don Keenan, who's one of the best trial lawyers in the country, if not the best. So learn from the best lawyers and then be yourself. Because I think for a long time I was who I thought I should be. And something about being sick and kind of getting to your bottom and to your desperation, I really found myself and I found my voice. And I'm not a perfect lawyer. And in Hawaii, I think a lot of people were waiting for Mark Mueller or some famous lawyer to show up. And I kind of was like, in the courtroom, right? This is $1 billion case, hopefully. And they got me because I care, because these are my clients, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And I'm going to be authentic to who I am and to who they are. And I think that goes a long way. And that's how you earn people's trust. That's how you earn the judge's trust, the jury's trust, your client's trust, the community's trust. And man, in today's world, that's the currency you need. You need trust.
People have been betrayed.
Yeah.
And I think that's starting to come out. And I have always said, when the moms of the world realize how badly they've been betrayed by the system, by the government, by, in the setting of war, sending kids off to war because they are told it's patriotic. And then later finding out, which they don't usually find out, that war was some corporate game that was played. And their child played with their life. When that anger gets tapped into, then things will really change. And I think what you're saying is that you're tapping into that in a much wider scale. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I would say that I was just going to say the power that you bring is authenticity. You also bring passion, which is quite obvious, but you also have an element that I would describe as love. You come from love in addition to those things. Is that right?
100%. I mean, I think love conquers all, right? And I think the jury and the clients can see that. And as you've seen, I get angry. I get fired up, but I get fired up out of love and passion and indignation for what's true and what's right and what makes sense in the world. And I don't like when things are not making sense. And I really don't like being lied to. And I really don't like watching other people being lied to. And I didn't really understand that word gaslighting until I saw it so clearly happen, right? People are smelling fuel and the institution that they trust with their lives, right? With their country, with their lives, with their family, is telling them there's no indication it's not safe. Hosting town halls all over the base. This is the Hawaii case, and telling people it's safe. I mean, that is the definition of gaslighting at the highest levels. But the other thing I would say is that I had the benefit of really studying and becoming a good lawyer too. Authenticity is great, love is great, but for the young lawyers, so is skill and study and hard work and honing your craft. And you'll find, I think, that your career will only make sense over time. In this Hawaii case in East Palestine and the things I'm doing now, it's community organizing from my Africa days. It's government work from my time in the government at DOJ. That's how I know how to bring those claims. It's complex federal litigation and working with big teams and herding the cats of lots of lawyers around you. And all of that, and then of course my own experience with toxic exposure, all of that prepared me for what I think is my mission and calling. But along the way, it may have been confusing. Why am I doing patent litigation?
Well, Truth and Justice League, our group, is kind of like a movement too. And it started with us going, the government's not going to save us. The companies aren't going to save us. We, the people, have to gather our own strength and courage. And we have to go out there and do this, or it's not going to happen. And we're at critical time. We're at very critical time. So it sounds like you're right in line with what we're doing. Thank you so much for being here. And we got a couple more minutes left. But Ariel, do you have a present for her?
Yeah, I actually have everything.
Okay.
You know, I love what y'all are doing because it just makes sense. And that's what I've learned about our jury system in particular. I didn't know this until recently, that the American jury is a relatively new concept, right? We didn't have a civil jury system in England. And that was one of the things that our founders fought for. They wanted to have a trial by jury for civil disputes. And so, you know, we look at democracy and there can be a huge presidential vote and your vote is one of millions. But for that jury, they participate in the democratic process. They are our democracy and they are enforcing the safety rules. So we can entrust these issues to the people. It is the people. It's the people who are bringing the claims. It's the people like us who are litigating the claims, and then it's the people who are receiving them. In our country, we don't have justice by the aristocrats, justice by the judges. We have justice by the people. And that's a beautiful thing, and we should use it more, I think.
We should use it more, and we need to keep it because we're under attack. All of us are under attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
We trust the juries, and the defendants know too well that the juries, you know, will do the right thing when they're given the right tools. Mm-hmm. And they don't want that.
Right. No, 100%.
Ariel? On behalf of Truth and Justice League, and as the founder, I want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this. And I'm going to give you a little gift here for being our guest and for being our friend, and hopefully that we will have a long-standing relationship with you.
Cool. I love it. Look, it's beautiful. It is beautiful. And what's on the back?
So
this is an
yes.
Peace. And is this shalom?
This is peace in Arabic and Hebrew and English written on the back. It's actually a prayer that the jewelry maker is a friend of mine, and he was very upset about what was going on in the Middle East and felt that he couldn't do anything. And he at one point was a Israeli tank commander when he was young. And he was shattered by the guilt, and he hated the experience. And so he was very torn up, and he wanted to do something about the genocide and the horrible situation that's going on. And I said, well, why don't we do a peace pendant? And so he prayed into this peace pendant. In the process of doing it, this is our logo, the Truth and Justice League logo. and it's got it's got the dove of peace carrying a rose, and on the back is written in Hebrew and Arabic and English, peace, for intending peace for all mankind. And so that's what we got for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the closing argument, can I say one more thing?
You can say whatever you want. Keep talking.
In the,
I'm not kicking you out of here.
I'll end with this. In the closing argument of my own case, defense counsel stood up and said, the Baehrs clearly have many resources. Because, by the way, we had to pay for that lawyer by ourselves. So we paid hourly for that lawyer. Wonderful lawyer, Kevin Terrazas, best lawyer on the planet. But the Baehrs have resources. And when bad things happen, you need to be thankful for what you have. And I was so upset because I am very thankful for what I have. And I'm very thankful for the people who showed up in our lives and helped us through that season. I mean, my lawyer friends who showed up and gave me work clothes, right? Because I got rid of everything. And my other mom friends who showed up and gave books for my kids, and my friends who gave me bedding. And I just, it was obviously a very humbling experience, but to be accused of not having gratitude just cut me to the core. And I started thinking about gratitude, and can you have gratitude and seek justice? And the answer that I came to was a resounding yes. My clients have gratitude, and they can seek justice, and they should seek justice, because it's not just about them, it's about everybody else. And I was commenting on these things and thinking about these things, and a friend wrote and said, justice and gratitude is shalom. So thank you for this.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
What has been the thing that you try most to teach your children?
Look for the helpers.
Explain.
When bad things happen, there are always going to be helpers. And look for the helpers and try to be the helpers. So I took my daughter to the 9/11 museum, and I said, this is going to be sad. And she went in there, and when she came out, she said, Mom, it was very sad. But look at all the helpers. Did you see all the helpers? Because in the museum, there's so much about the firefighters who showed up and, went in and risked their lives. And I'm getting called to a lot of circumstances that are tragedies. Red Hill, East Palestine, just all the people who I represent who have lost their homes and their belongings. And I can encourage them to look for the helpers. There are helpers. Look for the good guys. Even you might think that some institution is all bad. Not true. There's someone there that's a good guy. Find the good guys and try to be a good guy. Try to be one of the helpers. And that's what I've been living out. And so, especially with the Hawaii case, because it was my first really big one. But I brought Maddie, that same girl who went to the 9/11 museum with me, I brought her to Hawaii to see one of our hearings. And she got to see our family, our whole family, use our experience to help others. And there's no greater legacy, I think, that we can leave them. That's who we want to be in the world.
You make me feel good. It's really special to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing these things that you've shared. They're very personal, and it goes very deep. I can tell you're a good person. It may sound like a complete understatement because you're just an absolute warrior. In a warrior in the best way. Because, I don't like typically when they talk about lawyers being warriors and we go, the modern gladiator. But, you have to have a spiritual warrior inside of you or you quit.
That's true.
And you can't quit. Can't get there if you quit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a UFO?
Oh, that was one of your questions. So I've never seen a UFO, but I have taken Cooper. So our whole family, when we were sick, actually went to see a doctor in Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And before I went to Roswell, I did not believe in aliens or UFOs or anything. But after I went to that UFO museum, I am absolutely a believer. I was blown away by what I saw. And Cooper became so interested. He went to this amazing school called Longview, and he came back and he did presentations at school about it. And we started watching documentaries. And so I've not seen them, but I believe in them.
Well, there's so much that we don't know or we
Yeah.
haven't been told. You know, you've got to wonder.
Have you seen one?
Maybe.
Okay.
You know, I had a couple times where there was something that really it was just an anomaly. And, you know, it's such a weird, powerful experience because at the time I was like, what? You know, what? Holy moly, right?
Yeah.
It was that, it felt like that. And inside I went, this is what this is. And then as soon as that experience ended, I started questioning myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, going, did I really see that? What was that? I started doubting myself. And now I can't even really tell you where I was or what I was thinking at the time. Mm-hmm. But I've had a couple times like that where it was just like, wow. Mm-hmm. And then I immediately started discrediting myself, the power of all that, you know.
Was it Gus? Was it God, Universe, Spirit?
You know, there's so much we don't know. And, you know, it's really a miracle that we are here at the same time, living, breathing humans at this time. I mean, the odds of that are so astronomical, right? Here we are. That I have a lot of gratitude. I forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a daily have to remind myself not to be overwhelmed, not to be afraid, not to give up.
Yeah.
And to try to lead with the heart every day for a moment. You know, it's for me, it's the morning. I go at, you know, because usually by the end of the day, I'm in my jam. I get to feeling like I know what I'm doing and I'm feeling good. And then something happens at night. And in the very first part of the morning where I'm getting up, I actually have to go through a ritual to bring myself back in.
Yeah.
And then to get myself feeling like I can actually go through things. That was one of the things I was going to ask you is one thing, this is practical, and that is, do you have a morning ritual or something to get you ready for your day that you can describe real quickly? Like, do you have something that gets you going that makes you feel like you're ready to do the day?
Evan brings me coffee in bed, and we just have a minute together, and that's really special. And my kids come in and jump on the bed and snuggle for a minute, and my dog's usually there, and it's just this little minute of joy, and that starts the day.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do it again, okay?
Yeah, I love it.